Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, I'll be going through the solution to exercise 4.10 from the C programming language textbook by Kernighan and Ritchie. Now, exercise 4.10 says that an alternate organization uses getline to read an entire input line. This makes getch and ungetch unnecessary. Revise the calculator to use this approach. Now, the first thing I'm going to do before I even think about a solution is write the getline function. So if you remember, we used this getline function in exercise 1-16 as a solution, and we have a limit and an actual line we're going to call S, and I'm just going to go through this real quickly because we've already programmed this. So we have an integer C, an integer I, and then we had a for loop, and then we go up until limit -1 because we obviously want to save space for the terminator, the null terminator. And then we do this, and C also cannot equal a new line, and then at the end we increment, and then we set that character in the line, and then we check why did we break out. So if we broke out at a new line character, then just set that new line character in the line. So we'll just do this to be explicit, increment I, and then we'll do that to terminate the line, oops, and then return I. Okay, that's my getline done, and I'm going to have max line len as 100. So when we read in our line, the max line len is going to be a constant that's set to a 100. Okay, so how can we go about programming the solution? Well, anywhere we have getch and ungetch, we're going to have to do something with our line. So what I want is a line that the get op will read from. So I'm just going to call this line char line, and it's going to be of length max line len. And I'm just going to initialize it all to 0, but doesn't really matter because these are useless values anyways. And then I'm going to have an index into this line, and I'm going to call it in line index. I'm going to initialize it to 0. So what I want here is, instead of using getch, I want getOp to just get the character from the line. So we'll do something like this. And then to go to the next character after, we'll do that. So this will get the character at line index, and then after it gets that character, it will increment the line index so we are ready for the next character. So that's how we're going to use getch. How we're going to use ungetch? Well, ungetch is really simple. We are just going to decrement line index using that or that. Doesn't matter. Okay, so here's one problem that's quite clear already. We can't just replace our code with this straight away because line doesn't actually have an input line. We need to actually read in an input line. But the thing is, we can't just read in one input line because what if the user puts in multiple lines? So we need to figure out when we should or shouldn't read a new line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an enum. I'm going to create, as you can see, I'm creating all this stuff right on top of getOp just so it's clear. But I'm going to create an enum called boolean, and it's going to have values no and yes. So no will be false, yes will be true. And then I'm going to have a type of enum boolean called redline, and it will be initialized to no. So redline will tell us whether we have just read a line or not. Okay. And so let's go about checking if we should read a line or not. So if redline equals no, then we should obviously just read a new line. But when else should we read a new line? Because this will only get done for the first line of input. When should we also read any subsequent lines? Well, when our current line reaches the end. So when line of line index, how do we know if it's reached the end? Well, it obviously equals a null terminator. And then we can say getline, my getline, I want to read in the line, a new line, max line len, and into line, and then I'm going to set redline as yes. Oops. And then I'm going to initialize or reset index to be 0. We also have to be careful here because it is possible that after this we get an empty line. So how do we know we got an empty line? Well, if the length of line equals 0, then just return EOF. Why return EOF? Because the only way this myGetLine will give us a line length of 0 is if we immediately just hit EOF. Because here it gets initialized to 0, then we hit EOF, we never get to the increment, breaks out and returns 0. So that is the only way we get a line that has length 0 is if we hit EOF, so we'll just return EOF. Okay. And because we're using strlen, I'm going to make sure I include string.h. Okay. Now it's really simple. Wherever we have getch, I'm just going to replace it with, like I said, this. And can't forget the increment. And then here we have it again. And we have it one more time here. Okay. And here we have ungetch. And as we said, for ungetch, we will just decrement a line index. And I don't even think we need to check if it's EOF. Yeah. We'll just do that. Yeah, we don't need to do, we don't need to check if it's EOF because we're not going to be using a buffer anymore. We're not going to be using getch or ungetch. So in saying that, let us remove these two and let me just search. Oh. No. And we'll remove these two. Okay, let's see if this works. 4-10, and I'm not going to forget to link the math header library. What's this say? Line 74. Forgot a semicolon. Alright, let's give this a go. I'm going to say 3, 5 plus. I expect to see an 8. Nice. 2, 1 minus. I expect to see a 1. Oh. That's because we don't have minus. We've done that as part of another solution. So let me try that again without minuses. 2, 1 multiplied. 4, 5 addition. Let's try something like 3, 4 plus, which will give us 7. And then 2, 3 times, which will give us 6. And then I'll multiply the result of those two. So 6 times 7, which is going to be 42. Nice. And then one more, we'll do 14, 3 plus, which will give us 17. And then 3, let's see, 3 times, which give us 9, and then we'll add them together, we'll get 26. Yeah, okay. So that's the solution to exercise 4.10. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.